Welcome to Our Future is Kind, a podcast exploring how we build the future we want to live in, one kind act at a time. I'm your host, Michael G. Neese, president of Our Future is Kind, and your trusted companion as we search out kindness strategies we can use in our everyday lives. Together, as we chase the idea of building a kinder future, we will interview experts in kindness, team building, human motivation, corporate culture building, relationships, plus politicians, artists, and those with a vision for a healthy and kind future, one we all want to live in and deserve to enjoy together. In addition to interviews, we will consider positive depictions of humanity's future in art, literature, the movies, and media. And we will issue kindness challenges each week, give an update about Our Future is Kind, the company, and what it's doing to stay true to its mission. So, let's dive in. Angus Pryor is a prominent Australian founder of Dental Marketing Solutions. Since 2014, he's been assisting dental practices across Australia in enhancing their patient acquisition and business growth through tailored marketing strategies. That does not even begin to scratch the surface with how magnificent a human being Angus is. So, Angus Pryor, thank you for being with the program.
Thank you, Michael. Listeners, I've had the benefit of interviewing Michael on my podcast, so it's lovely that the shoe's on the other foot today.
Well, we will try to be kind. So I just introduced you, but what I love to do is have our guests introduce themselves. So please tell our audience, what makes you, you?
Right. I'll try and give you the shorter version. My professional history, which is, I assume, typically what people want, is the story of the 4Ds. I started as a drummer, believe it or not. I was a professional musician for a while. Tough way to make a living, but it was a box to check. And then I became a diplomat. I served the Australian government. I was overseas, outside Australia for 7 years, including a 3-year posting in Washington. Then, if you allow a bit of poetic license, I became a drug pusher, the legal kind. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a while, which I really enjoyed. And then finally became a digital marketer. And I suppose if you want a fifth D, I'm probably, what would you say, a dental kind of influencer or thought leader. Some people have called me that, so I'll take it.
That's you've had a broad and deep career. Yeah. I'm going to dig in with you for just a moment about the drug piece, because I also I've also worked in pharmaceutical product development for many years. Can you tell us just a little bit about that piece of your history? Because I'm very curious.
Yeah, no, I actually listened to one of Michael's podcasts last night while I was packing to go somewhere, flying out later today. And I'd forgotten that Michael, not only did the two of us live in the same county in Northern Virginia, but we also worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So, funny story, I finished my posting in Washington. I wanted to get out of government. I'd completed a master's degree in marketing, and I wanted to get into a more commercial environment. And I didn't want to move back to Canberra because it's largely government jobs. And so we ended up in Adelaide, which, if you were to kind of plonk Australia on top of the US, would be something like where Houston is. Okay. The big bite down the bottom, as they call it. And I'm working in a bank, discovering that I really don't want to work in a bank, and I'm working with a lady who's a lovely lady who worked for me, and she said, "Oh, my husband works in pharmaceutical. It's a really great job. They really look after their staff well. It's well paid." And I just hadn't given it any thought, but then I saw a job advertised. It was to be a rep, go and call on doctors, and I went through the process, and, perhaps this is a bit of a, I don't know, it's just a comment on what can happen in one's life, which is I was the last guy in. So they had, I went through a selection process. I didn't know anything about sales at all. They had 2 positions. I came third, and then one of the team got pregnant and she was going, and so I was like, okay, you get in, kind of by the skin of your teeth.
Mm.
And so I ended up calling on doctors around Adelaide for about a year and a half. That was with Pfizer. And I really enjoyed it. I think, Michael, the older I get, the more important it is about the kind of industry that I'm in. Like, does this thing really make a difference? I realize pharmaceuticals, not without its foibles, but I can say personally, there's been times I've been driving to the doctor, especially one time I had vertigo. I've never had that before, never had it since.
Ooh.
And I'm driving to the doctor and I'm thinking, dear God, I hope there's a drug for this. And there was, and it fixed it, thank God. So I did that, and then I moved into what they call the animal division. So that was Pfizer. I moved into the animal division of Sanofi, and called on vets, and did that for about 6 years. And that'd be close to the best job ever, Michael.
Yeah.
I just, when you're working with healthcare professionals, and I say this respectfully to the listeners, there's certain cultures in certain organisations, and not to be indelicate, but I think there's something to be said for having to pick up dog poop every day to keep the ego in check. I didn't find there were too many kind of uppity people working in vet practice. They're super down to earth. These lovely down-to-earth animals, and so that was probably the best job ever. But then I decided I needed to do something myself. So that's my pharmaceutical background.
Well, it feels very much to me like you have been in service, whether it's to people or to four-legged friends, that you've been in service to community. And being a diplomat, you are trying to make clear something that is maybe not clear so that there can be better relations. Hopefully that's not too big a generalization, but that's what I envision.
Yeah, it's funny, the diplomatic service. So I was in the immigration side, and so one of the hats I was wearing was the person running an office that processed literally tens of thousands of visa applications a year. And, just between you, me, and the listeners, Michael, actually, that kind of thing is my worst nightmare. I didn't know it at the time. I was like, hey, I could get posted overseas. That'd be amazing, And then I discovered high detail repeated work that's my definition of hell.
It's not for everybody.
No, it's not for everybody. Some people love that systems and processes. I don't like it at all. But then the other part of the job would be lots of liaison with other governments and reporting. And indeed, I was in Washington when we worked with one of the local departments there, and we set up a reciprocal agreement for Australians to come and do something like a working holiday in the US, and for Americans to do something like that in Australia. And so that part was fantastic. All the liaising, how do you guys handle this issue? And in Washington, I could get the views of 6 or 7 governments in a pretty quick time. And then we just get a sense, are we on the outer here, or is the policies in Australia, are they consistent in a global sense?
Well, it sounds like that was also very valuable work, whether it was really your cup of tea or not. It was at least something that, was in service to people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think I found the older I get, the more you just get a sense of what you're good at and what you're not. And, I don't want to get too philosophical, but I would basically maintain at one level that life is about figuring out what you're really good at, how you can serve people in something that you love doing. And when you're doing that, I'd call that sort of $1,000 an hour activities, and you're in your sweet spot, it doesn't feel like work. You just do it for free,
Right.
As opposed to those jobs that you've got, you're paid $10 or $20 as a young person, and you were thinking that is purely for the paycheck and nothing else.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the Japanese practice of ikigai.
I've heard the name.
Yeah, it's this idea of trying to figure out what are you good at, what can you get paid for, what does the world need, and trying to find the overlap of, I think, 4 different categories. Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is where you feel in the zone, you are getting paid, it doesn't feel like a job. Which of course then brings me to your current practice. I have a copy of your book, and I know that you are interested in trying to help dental practices and healthcare providers. Tell us about that. What do you do that helps them, and how does that help all of us?
So your average healthcare professional, and I know this because they've told me, in the context of a 4 or 5 year degree, has literally no training at all on business.
Mm.
You think about that. So you a 5 year degree for how to become a dentist or a doctor or a physiotherapist or whatever, no business training at all. And so basically what's happened is globally, especially in the Western world, the number of healthcare professionals per capita is increasing quite rapidly.
Mm.
So if you know, Michael's listeners, I mean, he's got way less grey hairs than I do, but clearly he's got a few decades under the belt, same as me. And, you know, if I think back to when I was a kid, it was like there weren't that many choices of doctors or dentists. I didn't even really know about physios back in those days, or chiropractors or whatever else. And therefore, you didn't need any business skills. It was like, as I used to say, it'd be set up your practice, put out the welcome mat, maybe put an ad in the yellow pages, and that was it. And you'd be booked out for weeks. Mm. In Australia, and I think in the US as well, like the number of practicing doctors, dentists, physios is growing 3, 4, 5 times faster than the population's growing.
Wow. Wow.
And so, yeah, and so these guys that have had zero business training are being forced to embrace the business side of being a healthcare professional. Previously, it was all about clinical excellence, which, you know, as consumers we want. And so basically, I've got 2 businesses now. One of them is we help with the marketing just to bring in new patients. It's something that you know, for better or worse, the doctors are having to contend with. And then the second thing is now we've got an outsourced team in the Philippines, and it allows the practices to have low-cost admin and phone support so that they can compete.
It's wonderful. I'm sure that there are some listeners out there right now who are saying, okay, this is a podcast about kindness. We're talking about business. Why should we care if a doctor or a dentist or some other healthcare provider, why should we care if they are good at business?
I guess, you know, from a sort of societal point of view, it's expensive to train Michael Jr. I'm picking on my co-host here. You know, let's imagine Michael's got a son called Michael. Maybe you do. And you know, wake up one day and go, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a dentist. I want to be a doctor. Like, it's expensive for society to educate Michael Jr. to get to that point. That's the first thing. Like, the cost to the economy is expensive, even though in both of our countries, Michael Jr. is going to end up with a debt. So that's the first thing. And so therefore, it's good for everybody if Michael Jr. is able to practice and bring his gift to the world, you know, and bring the gift of health. Yeah. So it's not just the kind of cold, hard, here's the business side. It's let's let this person actually bring their gift. And, you know, in the same way, say we've spoken about our sweet spot of, I think, in terms of $1,000 an hour activities. I mean, that's what we want our healthcare professionals to do, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
You know, I can think about a few times in my life. There was a chiropractor we had in Adelaide, American guy. I don't know why. I just have this theory that many of the best chiropractors are American. Not sure why. And this guy had this unbelievable skill. He could just look at you. You'd walk in and, you know, you'd lie down on his table, and without you saying a word, he would press exactly the right point. He knew exactly what was wrong with you, and I would walk out of his office feeling like I was floating on air. And society benefits when that individual is adequately exposed to the marketplace so that people know what he does so that he can bring his gift to us.
Well, I've heard it said that marketing is important because you can't help people if they don't know about you.
Yeah, yeah. Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad, Poor Dad fame, I think I'm right in saying he's the biggest selling business author of all time.
Mm.
It's in the order of 500 million books.
Wow.
Yeah, multiple series of books, multiple iterations. And he said about himself, which I think is an extraordinary quote, "I'm not the best author. I'm not the best author. I'm just the best marketed author." And I just think, that therein lies the problem. Build it and they will come. In 2025, nope.
No, they have to know about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know is very deeply important to you is very deeply important to me as well, that we reach beyond our business practices. We reach beyond, the ideas of how do we help our core customer, and we reach out to community to help community as well in general. I know that you are a big-time philanthropist. Can you talk to us about charitable donations, volunteerism, any of the perspectives that you have about how we really need to give back to our communities and maybe, put in a plug for one or two of your favorite charities?
Yeah, wow. I guess I know what happened. Again, I suppose what happens, and I read a book called Half Time, which basically talks about the first and second half of your life. And in the first half, they talk about learn and earn. Right. And then in the second half of your life, you go, did I matter? Basically, that's the book in a nutshell. And so the older I get, listeners, you don't need to be in your 50s to do this. You start to go, well, what impact am I actually making? Yes, maybe make my life a little bit more comfortable because I earn some good income, certainly on a global scale. But it's that impact stuff that is the things that I suspect the older you get, the more you look back on your life and go, I really want to make an impact. And so I got involved in a group out of the US. They were called sort of the Thrive movement. I went to a conference in Las Vegas. It was about 10 years ago, and they talked about for-purpose business. And what their premise was that the charitable model is broken. I'm not saying it is. I'm just giving you basically, if you're constantly having to go back to the, donors, give, come on, like that's okay, but wouldn't it be better if you could have a really successful, thriving business and that is automatically kicking out income which can go for a charitable purpose? And I really liked the mix of kind of practicality and the impact. And so as you see, if you go to our homepage, we've got a thing for big checks. And so it pretty much, certainly every year and often more often than that, we are able to work with our various partners and clients and so on and have things like charitable auctions and then deliver big checks to, we did it to the Red Cross. We've certainly done mental health. We did a kids cancer project. And then more recently, because we've got a number of team members in the Philippines, we've started supporting one of the local elementary schools there. And Michael and I were talking before we got on air about some of the least enjoyable days in our life, mainly around putting pets down. I can tell you, I would say in the top 10 days of my life, a couple of those days would be around charitable. And not because I can tell people about it, but because of the impact that it had on me. One was actually only last year, which is when I went and met the sponsor child that we'd had in India for 10 years. And I was blown away by this kid. It was chicken feed for us, $30 or $40 a month or something. My kids got involved in the sponsorship. And you imagine, this child's a sponsored child, so they don't have money for the basic requirements. And she was so happy and she was so confident and such a great communicator. And I just, oh, it was heart-wrenching. It was like, wow, not that we're so amazing, but that we've been able to impact that one person's life. So that would be one of those kind of best days of my life. And the other one was earlier this year when we took a bunch of our team out to an elementary school, which is about an hour from where our team are in the Philippines. And again, big checks. I'm trying to get my words out, Michael. Like, it just was shocking to me. This elementary school with 300 kids, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Some of these kids, the only way they can get to school is to walk an hour each way.
Wow.
And these 7 teachers, where the income from the local government for running the entire school, 7 teachers, 300 kids, I think the money from the government was $5,000 a month. Which in a Western context would be what, 1/100th what the real cost is, for employing 7 people, and these teachers are so committed and the kids were so lovely, and so we took a big check out, and then we were paying for school supplies for these kids, and then the kids came and danced for us, and then we had a bit of fun with them and played some games, and then they made a lovely feast. And for me, the impact that you can have with those kids, we're going every quarter now. Again, take a big check out. This time we're paying to get a canteen constructed for them. And because we're in the dental industry, we're taking toothbrushes and toothpaste, and we're going to do a little skit about brushing your teeth and so on. And for me, that impact on those kids, where they from such poverty, and
Yes.
and such a small amount can make such a big difference, is great for me personally. But for my team, they absolutely love this stuff. And, we can't have all of us go every time. So we've got this little internal competition, what you've got to do to be allowed to go and serve these kids. So, yeah, the impact is massive.
Well, we are here and we are lucky to be here, but I think we're even luckier to have each other. One of the things that I've always said to any team that I've led is if we're not here for each other, then I don't know why we're here.
Yeah, well, otherwise we just become a bunch of disconnected individuals working in isolation. And what's fun about that, Michael?
Nothing at all.
No.
No. So I have some standard questions that I'd love to ask all of my guests. And so you've probably already heard some of these, but if you're willing, let's
go for it.
All right. So here's the adventure. We're hopping into a time machine. We're going forward 100 years and then stepping out. In those intervening 100 years, we did everything right. We didn't leave any stone unturned. We did all of the right things. We were kind to each other. We were, building the right things and all of that. As you step out of the time machine, what are you looking for to confirm that we've arrived in the best possible future? What are you looking for?
I mean, strangely, the word that pops into my head is cooperation. I was listening to a podcast interview yesterday. Someone was recalling, a family member was a social worker, and they said, nobody's behavior is strange if you fully understand the backstory. In other words, if you have kids, they're talking about kids with antisocial behavior at school and, people getting into crime, etc. And so when I think about if we're doing everything right in 100 years' time and we're cooperating and people are coming at the world from this backstop of I've experienced kindness and therefore working together is just normal. And we can do it harmoniously. Yeah, that would be what I'd be looking for.
So people from various backgrounds, they don't let any obstacle stand in their way of actually reaching out across to do the right thing with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, It's a funny thing. Like Australia's a pretty multicultural country, same as the US. And I was at church on Sunday, and they had three singers across the front, and two of them were from Indian background, but they sound like Aussies because they've grown up here, and one was Anglo, and then one of the other musicians was from a sort of certain European background, and someone else had some of this, and I was like, what a melting pot, and I was thinking coming on this podcast, and all of that for me was a total non-issue, and for me it was the same sort of concept. It was like, don't care what your background is, don't care whether you've got one leg or two legs or, whatever ability or disability that you've got. It's that sense of just people just work together, cooperate, and all of that is a non-issue.
For me, as you're saying this and thinking about the spectrum of different kinds of people who could be, in a community or who are working together on a project, I always go back to Star Trek. That is my go-to, because I always imagine that we enter a future where it doesn't matter if you're a shimmering orb of light, if you're an android, if you're blue, if you're female, if you're male, none of it matters. The only thing that matters is that you're showing up in good faith, that you are listening to the other people who are at the table, and that you have that sense of adventure and curiosity. And that's it. That's the only requirements for membership in the club.
Yeah, look, you've described it better than I have, Michael, but I think you've got the same. The visual that you described is the visual that was in my mind when you asked the question.
Yeah, it's here's the second part to the question. Okay, we did all of the right things to get to that beautiful new future. What are all of the right things?
Yes. This is a very hard question. They ask the hard questions on our Future is Kind podcast. Look, Michael very kindly sent me his book, which I've read, and one of the things that I underlined in the book was just about us, that kindness it needs to come from a certain place, doesn't it? And you talked at one point in the book about actually how we're looking after ourselves as well. Because if I turn up on this podcast and I've not slept at all, and maybe I've had some other meetings before this, or maybe I've had an argument with my wife or whatever, like it's very difficult for kindness to come from that place. Mm-hmm. And so I suppose what are the right things? We've got to prioritize it in multiple ways. You guys have just been through an election where we're voting this Saturday. It almost feels like a political speech, and that's certainly not my goal. I'm not a very political person at all. But I suppose if this was the election platform, I'd be like, for you to prioritize kindness, we're going to have a national system whereby everybody, you've got to spend, I don't know, an hour a day, with me time. So that you can recharge and refuel, and that becomes we'll have a national refueling day or, something like this. That'll be the first part. I think the second part is, and I'm being slightly facetious here, but hopefully the message is coming through, that we mandate that every employer, every workplace has to have a kind of refueling moment, whether you build that into the day, and that then kind of on the other side, you let the high detail people get involved, and then we've got a bunch of metrics about how we're living this kindness. Mm-hmm. Now, the truth is in my organisation, I've got a couple of organisations, but one of them, kindness is one of our values. Mm. And so every week, in fact, later today, the entire team will vote on how we've been living our values in the last week.
Wow.
And so, it's very easy to put your values on the wall, but to actually vote and say, are we living this or not? So that's, without much notice, that would be my kind of, if you will, my election platform, which is, I think kindness has got to come from, within, which means you've got to be able to recharge yourself. And, but also I think there can be some systemic things which would help. That's my best crack.
I think that's a powerful way of looking at it. The idea of self-care and how important that is. I think I'm grateful that you have brought that up, because a lot of people think about, very tangible actions, like you are, giving to a charity, or that you are including people in conversations and whatnot. But the whole idea of it starts with yourself, that's a brilliant insight, Angus. Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, I might have got it from some smart man's book.
Well, we learn from each other, right?
Indeed.
So what do you do to stay kind? I know that you have woven certain practices into your organizations. You've obviously woven it into your life, but there have got to be days when it doesn't feel easy. What are the practices that you chase in order to stay kind?
We had a off-site meeting this week for managers, and one of the things that we did was we asked each other for feedback about, I guess, it's just funny, I can't remember the exact words, but the gist of it was, what are you doing really well at, and what could you get better at? And I actually found that really helpful for me. Like, the one thing about being the boss is that you're probably the person least likely to get the feedback, because there's a sort of a sense of, oh, I'm not going to tell him the truth because he might sack me, which is,
Sure.
as far as I know, never happened, certainly not in my organization. But I found that feedback incredibly useful. And, for me, one of the things that I've got to be really careful about is the kind of culture of the organization. Alex Hormozy, a guy I follow, he says in his organization, we're kind but not nice, which is a really interesting comment. And like when I'm getting honest feedback from a couple of the executives, it was, I don't know, I guess I just wanted it. I was so grateful to get it, because there are things that I really wrestle with. One of the things I wrestle with as a business guy is, on the one hand, it's my job to, on occasion, kind of razz up the organization and go, hey, let's go, like a coach, kind of, we need to be moving forward. But on the other hand, what I don't need to be doing is leaving a trail of carcasses behind me, as I kind of pound through. And so that feedback and getting that balance right is really important. I don't know, what else do I do to be kind? Look, to be honest, I do read a lot. I listen to mentors a lot. Another mentor of mine was talking about speaking to a therapist, and he made this, I thought, a very interesting observation, which is that nobody would bat an eyelid if you said, oh, I'm going to see the massage therapist today. Nobody would bat an eye if you said you're going to see the physical or physiotherapist, as we call it in Australia. And yet the kind of mental health therapist would be like, ooh, Michael, what's going on? And so what this guy said is he just meets with a therapist once a month, and he's like, he just figures, that's kind of part of my overall health. And so I've started doing the same thing. I just found it enormously helpful to be able to reflect on kind of who I show up as. He and I talk about grumpy Angus a bit because grumpy Angus is not kind Angus, and in business there can be a lot of stress on you. And so he's helped me to sort of coach myself as though I were an elementary school teacher. I thought that image was really helpful. Somebody said it to me on my podcast, and then he said, well, what if you imagine that as you're coaching yourself, that you are a teacher of 5-year-old children? And I thought, yeah, that's about right. There's a little bit of correction there, but a lot of it is encouragement and support. And so when I'm trying to be kind, which is one of my company values, and I mess up, which we do, then it's kind of to give yourself that, it's like you've got the elementary school teacher there kind of going, hey, Angus, like you did a really good job over here. We just need to get a bit better over there. So that probably helps as well.
Those are wonderful tips. Hopefully everybody who's listening or watching, you're taking notes, but if not, we'll have this in the show notes. So have no fear. You mentioned elections. You mentioned that you have one that's coming up on Saturday. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I only bring that up because a lot of people don't agree with whoever wins. It doesn't matter who wins in terms of, you're going to have one group that is fairly happy and one group that is not.
Yeah.
So going forth into the world, there are moments where you may not love what's going on around you. You may be affected by that storm that may be around you at that moment. And 4 years later, it could be a different storm, right?
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how do you, Angus Pryor, stay inspired?
Yeah, politics is interesting. Look, I must admit, I'm a pretty apolitical person, but one of the things I noticed as an Australian living in the US, I would say in general terms, Americans wear their politics on their sleeve much more than Aussies do. I mean, to give you an idea, like I'm going to say to you, I might have a hint. I actually literally don't know who my wife votes for. We just don't discuss it. I would say all my best friends in Australia, I don't know who they vote for. Occasionally you'll hear sentiments about some sort of policy. You'll say, oh, I don't like that, or I like this. How do I stay inspired? Like for me, politics doesn't bother me so much, but I'm sure that's not the case for many of the listeners. But, I was listening to a podcast recently about AI, and I'm like, holy crap, Batman, like this could completely tip what I'm doing on its head, and many of us are probably feeling that a bit. And what do? I mean, you just take another step forward, Michael. Like, what else can you do? For me, it's probably how do I live my life? And so that involves hopefully lots of sleep, lots of exercise. And I mean, this is what I'm actually doing. I try to be in bed for 9 hours a night.
Oh, wow.
I'm exercising an hour plus each day for probably 5 days a week.
Wow.
I'm working with a trainer. I'm very careful about what I eat. So I feel like those things are really helpful. I'm really, really careful about what I listen to. I will tell you, to the shock and horror of at least half the listeners, I don't listen to the news at all. And this is because I know the business model that's behind it. Like, here's the news in a sentence, the business model. Sell bad news because more people tune in, which means we can sell more advertising.
Right.
Like, that's the business model. And so
Right.
you think, oh, they're there for some kind of communal purpose. I'm saying, well, unfortunately, the business model that sits below is bad news sells. That's statistically the case. So put lots and lots of bad news in the news because more people will tune in, which means we can sell more ads. And so for me, I don't listen to the news. If I want to feel thoroughly depressed, I'll do that. But yeah, so I'm very careful about what I read and watch. I remind myself I do spend a little bit of time on social media, especially as I work in marketing, but I'll remind myself, hey, you can spend 5 minutes on it, but then switch it off. Because what's the net impact for me of spending an hour on social media? Usually actually feeling a bit down because you're watching everybody's highlight reel. So yeah, I suppose I'm coming at that, Michael, mainly from a personal point of view.
Sure.
What can I do? And then I suppose the other thing I'd say, I'm very careful with the company that I keep as well. Like if I don't, I'm really pleased to say I just don't have people in my life who are a kind of constant drain on my energy and my enthusiasm. I've had some family members over the years which we've kind of slowly backed away from because, it just doesn't really serve me. And I guess my father was in many ways quite an impressive man. You don't have this in the US, but he achieved what they call the Order of Australia, which would be 1 or 2 steps down from being knighted.
Wow.
And he was a vet. And so he just was like, I'm here to serve. That was his mission. He really liked what he did, but he was here to serve. And I suppose, Like, how am I going to help the world? How am I going to stay inspired? I feel the same thing. I'm here to serve, but what that means is I've got to protect me so that I'm able to come from that place of kindness, that place of curiosity, that place of enthusiasm, rather than, well, it's all turning to crap anyway. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, the idea of being choosy or being mindful, I think is absolutely the way that I also live my life. What I read, what I take in. I also don't listen to or watch any news at all. I try to avoid it at all costs, because when it gets close to the time when I can impact something, like by voting, that's when I tune in a little bit, so that I know enough so I can at least scrub through the issues, scrub through the different candidates, and then at that point I'm informed. But otherwise, I don't need to hear about every bad thing that's going on. And to your point about avoiding, or maybe not avoiding, including in your life those who are also curious, those who are also inspired and inspiring. That's a great way to live.
Yeah, look, I think, as I say, certainly through talking to this psychologist, it's helped me with the person I show up as. He talked about giving people the benefit of the doubt, and there's that part of me as a business guy. It's like, come on, we need to make these things happen, and then I just try to insert into my internal dialogue, or maybe. Michael told me he was going to get this thing and he didn't get it to me in time, and that's because he's no good, and, or maybe. Or maybe, he was just busy, or maybe someone came and asked him to do something else, and actually that thing that he's working on is more important than the thing he's working on for me. Look, I am by no means there. This is something that I wrestle with every day, but I found that feedback very helpful. I mentioned about the feedback from my team. I found the feedback from being able to talk to this, therapist once a month really helpful as well. And Michael, my wife of 30-something years, she's pretty good in this space too. She'll give me feedback quite often. But yeah, I just it's really hard sometimes. There are times where you don't want to be kind at all, and yet I found, on reflection, every time I have been, actually it's been better for the other person and it's been better for me.
Not always easy to get there. And I like what you said earlier in the program about making sure to recharge the batteries, to make sure that you are fully loaded so that you can exercise that kindness a little bit more freely, a little bit more frequently as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think our audience is probably curious as to what you are up to next. So can you tell us what's your big project that you're working on right now? You said you're traveling. I don't know if that's something that you want to talk about, or
Sure. Look, two aspects. One is this outsourcing product we're launching in the US. And so I was in Chicago in February, and we've got a trial running at the moment with one client, and then I'm heading to California next week. That's one thing. But I think the other thing I'm equally excited about is our next visit to this elementary school, and that's in June. And I just, I'm not an overly sentimental person. I'm not an overly kind of emotional person. You can probably hear, listeners, the sort of, in some ways, the cold hard businessman in the midst of this. But I just, seeing the impact that we can make through such a small thing on those kids is really, and it must be impacting me because I've told so many people about it, it just. And as I said, I've told so many people about meeting my sponsor child last year. Literally, we did it when my kids were younger, and we all contributed. And just, for me, that's the sort of, at the end of your life, you're going to go, oh, I wish I spent more time in the office. No, I don't think so. But I think if you could look back and say, I wish I provided a positive impact on people. And whether that's charitable or just being excellent at what you do, and certainly how you show up in the world is, that can make a big difference. As Mark Twain said, one compliment can keep me going for weeks. And I thought that could be, that compliment from that person could have been a moment where maybe they didn't 100% feel like it, but they chose to embrace kindness at that time and say, you know what, I really enjoyed that. I really appreciated that, et cetera, et cetera. Not easy, listeners, we know that, but it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. The impact on one person can be enough. Yeah. So, Angus Pryor, tell us how people can get in touch with you to support you, to get your services, to have more conversation with you directly.
Well, fortunately, with a name like mine, I believe there's only 2 of us on the planet, as far as I know.
Wow.
So if you search whatever social media you're in, if that's your thing, or you can just go to the website anguspryor.com, so ANGUSPRYOR.com. There's a lecturer in the UK who I think is to do with art. So if you see someone with paintings in the background, that's probably not me, but apart from that, it's probably me.
Wonderful. Well, I encourage all of our viewers and listeners to reach out and get some more wisdom from you. Obviously, they can reach for your book on Amazon. Tell us one more time. What's the title of your book?
The Dental Practice Profit System. If you're working in dentistry, I've actually released one in physiotherapy as well, although that one's not quite on Amazon yet. But the book, if you go to physiotherapymarketing.com.au, you can get a free copy of the book there.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, especially when you were just about to travel later in the day. I really feel honored. And thank you so much for coming on the show. This episode's Kindness Challenge. Reflect on your business model. Is there a way to automate doing good within your profit stream, like a built-in donation system or quarterly service project? Make kindness visible. Create a team ritual like voting on values lived each week to keep kindness embedded in your culture. Support education where it's needed most. Consider donating to rural schools or becoming a sponsor for a student who wouldn't otherwise have access to school supplies, transportation, or meals. Want to stay inspired so you can stay kind? Take Angus's advice. You can't pour from an empty cup. Protect your sleep, your mental clarity, and your inputs. Choose what you consume. News, people, media, like your kindness depends on it, because it does. Want to be reminded of your impact? Visit the communities your business serves. Bring toothbrushes, bring a check, bring yourself. Thanks again for listening to our Future is Kind podcast, a podcast in search of a kinder future. Go out there and do something kind.